Today, well, first I want to introduce myself. I'm Melissa. I'm the Director of Science at Longevity Labs. Longevity Labs is a company based in Austria. It's sort of a spin-off from the University of Graz, where a lot of the research linking spermidine to the main inducer of autophagy was first elucidated by the team of Professor Frank Madeo. So a lot of the scientific literature I'm going to reference throughout this presentation, a lot of it is actually from this team originally. Obviously, it has become a bigger topic that now a lot of labs work on this in the world, but there's a lot of literature coming from this specific lab. Longevity Labs, as I say, from Austria, but we are a little team here in the US, based in Denver. And so you may be confused with the word Spermidine Life as well. This is the line of the products from Longevity Labs. So that's why there are two names of it. So today I'm going to talk about spermidine, that I like to call the longevity molecule. I'm not the only one. You will probably hear other people mention other molecules, the longevity molecule. To me, this one is probably one of the most important because you will see it touches on one of the main process in cellular health, which is autophagy. Let's just start diving in. I don't know how this works, if you guys want to interrupt, or maybe we do the Q&A at the end, but the way I structured the presentation is first I'm going to go through a general presentation of what spermidine is and how it works. We're going to go through some key health benefits that stem from the biochemical property of this molecule and what it does in the cell. I'll touch on some recent advances in science related to spermidine. If we have time, I'll dive into some specific impacts of spermidine on the metabolism that I think are very interesting, and we'll end up with a Q&A session. So just to start, spermidine, it's this very small molecule that has 7 atoms of carbons and 3 amine groups, so groups with nitrogen atom inside. That's why it's called a polyamine, more than one amino group. It's actually derived from an amino acid, partly arginine, and that's further transformed in ornithine. So it's derived from the amino acid metabolism. It's found in all living organism and cell. Bacteria, plants, animals, any living organism is going to have this molecule inside. It's essential for cellular function. I'll touch on the autophagy process, but if I were to remove all the spermidine from your body at once, you will not be able to survive for very long. So it's absolutely essential. So those 3 amino group here at physiological pH, they're actually charged positively. And so because of that, they actually bind themselves to DNA, RNA, a lot of protein. So this molecule also have an important role in stabilizing DNA and RNA, but we'll get into all of this in a little bit. So where do we get it? Because every organism has it. That means you ingest it in your food. So it's an important component of your nutrition. About 1/3 of your daily needs of spermidine come from diet and supplements. If you don't take any supplements, you probably ingest between 6 to 12 milligrams of spermidine per day. Some of the spermidine-rich foods are going to be the ones that we all know we should be consuming more. So beans, broccoli, nuts, peas, mushrooms, aged cheese. At the top of this list of the rich source of spermidine will be wheat germ. So that's what we use at Longevity Labs to make this supplement called Spermidine Life out of wheat germ. So we basically grind the wheat germ, extract it, remove the starch, and you're left with a powder that is rich in spermidine. But if you have a very healthy, mainly plant-based, close to Mediterranean diet, you could probably ingest 12 up to 15, and in some rare cases of those blue zones, sometimes up to 20 milligrams of spermidine per day. Another 1/3 of your daily needs come from your cellular metabolism, meaning your cells are able to produce it. It's derived from an amino acid, so you have a package of enzymes that are able to produce some spermidine from arginine. And there's an interconversion also with other polyamine, including putrescine and cadaverine. So it's a bit of a complex balance of all the polyamine. The last 1/3 of your daily need come from your gut. So the bacteria in your gut produce quite a bit of spermidine, and that will be relevant later in the presentation. So all of this participate in the systemic spermidine that you have that is essential for proper cellular activities. One thing that's very important that I need you to remember is that you have levels of spermidine that are maintained through your own metabolism, your food, your gut, and as we age, those levels of spermidine, so we're mainly in tissues, there is some correlation in blood serum as well, but there's a little bit more controversial data because the way it works is that for spermidine to really have an effect on cellular function, it needs to be taken by the cell and actually used, so converted. So what's really relevant in terms of levels of spermidine and health really is the intracellular levels or the levels in tissues that we can measure, which is hard to get as a biomarker like this. But we know from plenty of studies in animals, but including in humans, that levels overall decline with age. It can vary depending on the tissue, but overall they decline with age. Unless you supplement, there is a correlation between aging and decrease of spermidine level. So what does it do? Spermidine, I said it before, it's critical for autophagy, which is your cell cleaning system, like a spring cleaning system. I'm going to get into it. I've tried to make a visual representation to help if people are not very familiar with what autophagy is. This would be a cell in your body. Inside, there's plenty of stuff going on. You have a ton of proteins, organelles. I just represented mitochondria here that perform different functions for the cell to function, right? So your cells are constantly making new proteins, new organelles, and they get old, they get damaged, they need to be replaced. So autophagy is really this process of your cell that is going to be removing the junk as it accumulates for cells to function properly. So if you have an old mitochondria or an old protein, you need to get rid of it. The autophagy process, it really is the physical formation of this isolation membrane that forms an autophagosome that is going to encapsulate all the old or defective components, old mitochondria, old protein, but also pathogens, peroxidized lipids. So everything that needs to be removed that could impair proper cellular function. And then what happens is you have a lysosome, a vesicle filled with hydrolytic enzymes that is gonna fuse itself to the autophagosome and digest everything that's inside. So once this is done, your cells can reuse the components to remake everything anew and continue functioning properly. So in simpler terms, when autophagy works well, your cells stay healthy, the energy is used efficiently, and aging slows down. A cell that is starting to age and not function properly is going to have a defect in autophagy. So when autophagy is impaired, that's when junk builds up, inflammation rises, and that's the basis for diseases to develop. I'm going to dive a little bit into the membrane here, just to show you exactly how spermidine works and trigger this autophagy process, because I think it's very important to have a good sense that all of this has been biochemically elucidated, so we know how it works. So just bear with me. I promise I'll try to make it as understandable as possible. I think you'll get out of this with a better sense of how important spermidine is. So imagine this is the plasma membrane of any cell in your body. They can either produce internally, but a lot of it comes from extracellular sources, from your diet, microbiome, or other organs. Spermidine enters the cell, and that's the most important thing. What it's going to do out of other things, but like that's the main one, it's going to link itself to this translation factor called EIF5A. So like literally it's going to like attach itself. So that's the little yellow you see here. Oops, sorry. And this is going to activate this translation factor. What's going to happen is that it's going to trigger the synthesis of a transcription factor called TFEB. This is going to lead to a bunch of genes being expressed and synthesized that are important for the induction of autophagy. It's going to help express ATG3, LC3. Those are structural components that allow this autophagosomal structure to form. Without the activation of EIF5A, there is no transcription and expression of those important elements for the autophagosome to happen. You do need spermidine to express those structural components for the autophagosome to express itself. There's other alternative pathways that also have been elucidated. For example, spermidine can inactivate this acetylase called EP300. You may have heard of it. That is going to itself inactivate some autophagosomal proteins. So basically, it's a positive reaction on it. It can also activate FOXO3A, which is a transcription regulator. And all of those participate in expressing elements for autophagy to happen. Another important thing that this translation factor EIF5A can do, that is very important too, is that it can enhance the expression of some specific mitochondrial proteins. So spermidine, by activating EIF5A, can actually enhance mitochondrial function and enhance mitogenesis, so the synthesis of new mitochondria. I want to also point on something important, is that autophagy is a generic term to include also mitophagy. So spermidine not only activates autophagy or induces autophagy, but also mitophagy. So induces mitophagy, autophagy in general, and enhance mitochondrial function. I want to touch on something very quickly, just to give you a generic view of how this is related to caloric restriction.
You don't have to answer it now.
Oh,
I'm just putting a question that I thought was really interesting as I was
okay.
thinking about this, but you don't have to answer it now.
Okay. It's just I only see the preview on my screen, so I don't see the full question.
No problem. I'll read it to
Okay,
you.
sounds good.
No problem.
So to relate to caloric restriction and caloric restriction mimetic, you're gonna see the act on the similar pathway. When you have, so a cell can do one of two things. Either it has enough nutrients and energy to divide and proliferate, or it doesn't have enough nutrient or energy, and it's gonna stop dividing and rely on autophagy to keep functioning properly. So when you have a caloric restriction, what happens is you activate the similar pathway. So you also inhibit some acetylase, which are going to activate autophagy. You probably have heard of the mTOR pathway, which is the nutrient sensing pathway. When there is not enough nutrient, this pathway actually gets inhibited, so it doesn't activate, so it actually activates autophagy. You probably have heard also of AMPK, which is your energy sensing pathway. When there's not enough ATP or too much ADP in the cells, this pathway gets activated, which itself is going to activate autophagy. So at different levels, but they all, at the end of the day, funnel down into the activation of the autophagy. You may also have heard of the sirtuin pathway. This one can also get activated in caloric restriction and increase the expression of LC3, so a structural protein of the autophagosome. You've probably heard of rapamycin. It inhibits mTOR, therefore activates autophagy. You've probably heard of metformin, activates AMPK, which activates autophagy. And you may have heard of resveratrol, which activates sirtuin, which activates autophagy. So all of this just to show that at the end of the day, most of those caloric restriction mimetic, they converge into the same pathway, which is the activation of this phagic process. So autophagy maintains cellular homeostasis. We know that spermidine triggers autophagy safely, and I'll get into this in a second, and that maintaining healthy levels of spermidine is critical to allow this autophagy to happen properly. So just as a side note, spermidine activates autophagy, so clearing and damaged components, but it also drives, so the autophagy process also drives other effects of spermidine, which are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant as well. So there is really a triple action of spermidine. The main one and the most important process is going to be the autophagy, but also spermidine has been shown to have anti-inflammatory properties. It's been linked to the reduction of inflammatory cytokines. A lot of it is related to the actual activation of autophagy and also antioxidant properties. So by improving mitochondrial function, removing bad mitochondria, it actually reduces the production of reactive oxygen species, but it's also been shown to directly scavenge reactive oxygen species. So it can be a direct antioxidant as well. So most of those properties stems from the autophagy process. So to go back to the fact that spermidine levels decrease with age, we know that And we also know, so this has been a little bit controversial because this was taken in blood serum and sometimes it doesn't correlate well with the tissue, but overall, there is a correlation between people living longer and having a higher level of spermidine. So this really triggered the interest in researchers 30 years ago to start looking at spermidine as a potential longevity molecule. And indeed, there's been a lot of preclinical studies done in flies, in mice, in nematode, in yeast, that supplementing with spermidine prolongs the lifespan of those organisms by different levels, but overall between 5 to 20% extension of lifespan in mice have been measured by different teams. So there's a lot of literature out there. This is a new paper from a few months ago in Aging that also looked again at the extension of lifespan by supplementation with spermidine. But the interesting angle they took here is that they combined it with a protein restriction, so low protein diet. So really what they saw here, you could see in the x-axis the lifespan in age, in days of those flies, and the percentage of survival in the y-axis. A high protein diet was the lowest lifespan measured for most of the flies. As soon as you add spermidine, you extended the lifespan. A low protein diet was even more efficient to extend the lifespan of those flies. And the best was low protein, so protein restriction, and spermidine. If you remember, spermidine activates autophagy, and inhibiting mTOR also activates autophagy. You could do this chemically through rapamycin, but also if you are under protein restriction, this actually tunes down mTOR, which therefore activates autophagy. So that's probably the reason why the lifespan was increased. What is interesting to see is that you can have a cumulative effect by protein restriction and supplementation to extend the lifespan. So do we know if spermidine work in humans? Yes, we obviously do not have supplementation studies and measurement of lifespan for humans for obvious reasons. But we do have epidemiological studies, there are a lot that have been done, that show that a high spermidine intake is correlated with a lower mortality of all causes, including cardiovascular, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases. So it's been associated in population that consume a high spermidine diet with an average 5 years extended lifespan. So what's a high spermidine diet again? Think of the blue zone Mediterranean diet, usually the ones that have the highest amount of spermidine per day. So I'm not going to get into this one specifically, but just to show you that a higher spermidine intake is linked to a lower mortality, lower risk of developing diseases as well, including neurodegenerative and cardiovascular disease. So I'm going to get into specific health benefits that have been elucidated. You can imagine autophagy, all the cells of your body are going to benefit from being clean, basically. So it's gonna sound like snake oil, but spermidine does help with most of the age-related diseases you could think of. It's been shown, as I said, to improve age longevity, so reduction of all age-related diseases and prolongation of health span, the healthy years of your lifespan, basically. It helps against neurodegeneration, so it's been shown to protect against cognitive declines. We have like even studies with our own supplement, clinical trials in humans, where supplementation has been linked to a reduction in symptoms from dementia. It helps protect the cardiovascular system. So we also have clinical trials ongoing right now that show a reduction in high blood pressure. Well, that will show a reduction of high blood pressure because it's not officially completed yet, but it's promising. We also know it helps improve the metabolism, so it promotes the lipid metabolism. It can protect, again, type 2 diabetes. I'll get into this one specifically. It can improve glucose tolerance, protects the musculoskeletal system because, I mean, it helps reverse the senescence of cells, and it helps like just repair cartilage. So it has a lot of benefits in that way. It protects the immune system. We also have a clinical trials that's actually finished, completed, that shows that supplementing with spermidine helps older people develop a better response to the COVID and the flu vaccine by way of just improving the T cell health. Skin and hair, this is like more the superficial part, but pointing out because this is what people notice the most when they start supplementing, is that they start noticing better hair, better skin. So there's a lot of scientific literature out there that show that it can help with reverse the senescence of hair follicles, so it can help with hair growth, but also it stimulates the expression of some keratins and some proteins essential for the synthesis of melatonin. So some people also notice sometimes repigmentation. That's not everybody, but I thought it would just point it out. So this is some of the clinical trials we've been doing with our product. Other people have done it with other types of spermidine, but most of the clinical trials that have been done in human have been using our product. And the reason is for mostly historical reason, because we were the first one on the market, but also the people that co-founded the company include Professor Frank Madeo, who's internationally known to be the one that elucidated spermidine, that elucidated the mechanism between spermidine and autophagy activation. So there's a lot of, I guess, trust in the scientific community that asks for the supplement to be used to do their own clinical studies. We don't pay for those clinical studies. People ask us for the supplements. The main ones that have been the most successful and very interesting were definitely related to improvement of symptoms in people with early onset of dementia, the immune system, improve the vaccine response, and the cardiovascular system, so reduction in high blood pressure. Also, there's another one that's almost completed. The paper is in review, so it's not officially out yet, but the preprint is publicly available that shows that spermidine can also help supplementation with a reduction of depression symptoms because it helps decrease cortisol levels. And there's been some studies that had shown that in people with depression symptoms, the polyamine metabolism is actually a little bit disrupted, and that supplementing with spermidine can help reduce the one of the effect, which is higher cortisol. Okay, I said before that spermidine safely trigger autophagy, and the reason is it's one of the safest longevity supplement out there. There's a paper that back in 2020 that analyzed 124 different potential longevity supplements, and I compared the number of side effects versus the probability of a side effects and the effect on the lifespan. Spermidine came out at the top in terms of combining safety and longevity effect. And the reason it's safe, it probably is because it's already present in our foods, right? So we consume it every day. You already ingesting spermidine, you make it. So supplementing is usually safe. There can be some caveat depending on how much you supplement, that we can get into this. The products, for example, we propose are within dietary range, and it's not above the limit. It's actually within dietary range, which I personally believe that's where we should all stay. If we want to live longer and healthier, we should just try to mimic the people that already do, which are usually the people in Mediterranean zones or blue zones, instead of going to a crazy amount that we don't know what it's going to do, right? So a couple of just mentioned, let me see the time. I still have time. If I talk too much and you want me to stop at some point, you tell me. I want to get into a couple of papers that I think have been very important the last year that came out. One is involved some of our research partner at the University of Graz. I highly invite you to look into this paper because it's very interesting. That came out in Nature Cell Biology. And this paper showed for the first time, and made it very clear, is that spermidine is not only one activator of autophagy, is actually the main link between caloric restriction or fasting and longevity, meaning that what they showed in this paper very clearly is that when you fast, and they showed this in flies, in yeast, but also in humans, when people fast or go through a caloric restriction, whether it was through intermittent fasting or long-term fasting, their internal levels of spermidine increase, meaning your body actually increased the levels of spermidine. So fasting induces spermidine synthesis. What they showed is that this spermidine is essential to promote autophagy. When they had yeast that were not able to sustain levels of spermidine, the autophagy process was not happening in cases of caloric restriction. So spermidine was essential to trigger the autophagy process in fasting conditions. This autophagy process was the reason that the lifespan was extended in those organisms, whether it was yeast, flies, mice, or humans. Obviously, it wasn't measured, but in the organism that we use in the lab, the model organisms, the extension of lifespan was due to the activation of autophagy. So really the link is fasting triggers spermidine, which triggers autophagy, which extends the lifespan. So like it was a great paper to show this connection very well. If you were to represent like your level of spermidine and autophagy decrease with age, which increase the risk of age-related disease because your cells don't function properly anymore. When you fast and you add spermidine, so you need to have spermidine when you fast for it to work. This activates autophagy and leads to better health span and increased lifespan. So another paper that I want to just mention, because I thought it was very interesting, that just came out a few months ago. That was a preclinical study, so it's not in human, but they basically took mice and removed their ovaries to mimic menopause, so low estrogen condition. And what they showed in this paper very well is that when they were to give estrogen or spermidine supplementation, so inject estrogen or give orally spermidine to those mice in menopause, they were able to reduce the negative effects of menopause, which are usually a higher oxidative stress, higher cholesterol, insulin resistance, inflammation. Here you can see that's a mitochondria electron microscopy that is actually damaged. Those are internal membranes in the mitochondria. And you can see there's few of them. They're very disorganized. There's a reduced mitochondrial function that is linked to lower estrogen level in menopause condition that leads to a lot of the cardiovascular problems related to menopause condition. And so this is in the case of a mice that has mitochondria like this, that has been supplemented with spermidine or estrogen, and you can see like the mitochondria structure is restored. So comparable effects of estrogen therapy and spermidine supplementation in mice. That's a caveat. Obviously, this hasn't been done in humans, but it will be interesting to do so. So just to show you that there is a lot of potential health benefits that could be explored just by the properties of spermidine. I'm going to pass quickly on this slide just so we have time to talk a bit more, but obviously diabetes is a big crisis. Cases increases every year. A paper that is very interesting came out just about a year ago. And I want to highlight this one because it identified a new target of spermidine. And I'm going to get into it. So RIPK1, it's a protein kinase, and what it does, it activates necroptosis, which is a sort of cell death linked to inflammation. Necroptosis is a big problem for cells because it creates a lot of inflammation. It's a sort of a cell death that is not controlled and creates a lot of inflammation. And so the mechanism usually is this kinase is activated in people that have type 2 diabetes a lot, which creates a lot of this necroptosis leading to vascular damage, which leads to most of the diabetes complication. So we knew that spermidine activates EIF5A. I showed you this before, which activates autophagy, cell renewal. And now this paper clearly showed that spermidine is also able to link itself to this kinase, to this other protein, inactivated, therefore inactivating necroptosis, so reducing the cell death with inflammation leading to the diabetes complication. So what was very interesting in this paper is they showed a new target, and they also linked this looking at the tissues inside doing some biopsies of type 2 diabetes patients, and they did see a lower spermidine level, higher activation of RIPK1, including the data they collected on mice. So it was a very good paper. I mean, that's why it came out in Nature Cell Biology. It was pretty compelling that a low level of spermidine was linked to a higher activation of this protein leading to vascular damage. They showed that supplementation in mice was able to improve the diabetes complication, including insulin resistance. So the final conclusion of this paper was really that boosting spermidine levels, whether it's through better food diet or supplementation, could really help improve diabetes treatment. So not only diabetes, but also in general obesity and metabolic syndrome. Just to show you that spermidine, this has been shown in the literature. I'm not going to get to each of it, but spermidine, by means of autophagy and the expression of some specific proteins in the mitochondria, it helps boost fat burning and thermogenesis, the consumption of lipids to generate heat, limits fat accumulation, and it helps restore gut health and reduce inflammation. And I'm going to show you two last slides left because I think this one is very interesting also. Really, going back to the gut, a gut dysbiosis, meaning an imbalance in your gut, like more harmful bacteria than the good one, it's an important factor of obesity and type 2 diabetes. So the polyamine synthesis is actually very much disrupted in case of metabolic syndrome. So restoring gut microbiota, so better health of your gut, and spermidine levels can help improve metabolism and immune function in cases of obesity and type 2 diabetes. These are some health benefits of spermidine that have been demonstrated, most of them in preclinical studies, but spermidine helps reduce insulin resistance, decrease body weight. This has been shown in many studies in mice, improve gut barrier function. So we've seen increased autophagy, it decrease pro-inflammatory cytokines. It actually helps also with macrophage polarization. I did not get into this, so it can help enhance the immune system. And the important link here that I think is very important is that there is a connection between the gut and aging and health, meaning that when you age, this alters your microbiota. So it reduces the diversity and there's more harmful bacteria than the beneficial one. So dysbiosis is important to the increase of inflammation as we age. So chronic low-grade inflammation, what they call inflammaging. And the benefits of spermidine here that have been shown is that it helps enhance the gut barrier, it increases beneficial bacteria, and it reduces the inflammation and harmful microbes. The virtuous cycle here that is very important to maintain is that a healthy gut microbiome, which is linked to better health in general, produces more spermidine, which itself actually promotes the growth of beneficial bacteria. So there is a virtuous cycle here that helps reduce inflammation, protect cells, and help with healthy aging. If there is a conclusion here that I would say is that supplementing with spermidine can actually help your cells, your gut produce more spermidine. So then you enter like a healthy virtuous cycle where you have higher level of spermidine to allow for a healthy level of autophagy to make sure that your cells keep functioning properly. So it's cellular health that like translate obviously at the general level, but it all starts at the cellular health. I could get into much more, but we're not gonna have time. So if you want, we can do a Q&A now. Let me see if I can access the Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was a really comprehensive overview of what spermidine is and how it interacts with the key molecular networks that drive health and disease. This is one of the reasons why I was excited to have you come, because in my program, I really emphasize understanding some of these pathways. Hopefully, as people were looking at some of this, it wasn't overwhelming, because you should have, if you've gone through the curriculum, you'll have heard of things like AMPK,
Right.
mTOR, autophagy, and things like that. And so hopefully it also motivates you, if you haven't gone through it yet, to do it, because this is the future of how we're going to be talking about medicine. That was awesome.
100%. I cannot agree more. Even if you don't remember everything I said about the specific metabolic pathways, I think what's really important is like one part of it. It's not the only one, but is the convergence of mTOR, AMPK, and those pathways that they all converge at the autophagy. There are other effectors that are obviously affected by those pathways, but one of the main thing they do is really activating autophagy. That's how you get most of the longevity benefits from touching on those pathways. So really, that's what I wanted to put out there in this diagram.
It was odd. There were several diagrams there that I feel like people should come back to when they watch the recording. Let's get into some of the questions. I'll just go ahead and read them. First question is, since spermidine has wheat germ, I've hesitated to recommend this to clients if they have gluten intolerance and or celiac disease. Gluten And wheat reduction has been shown to help balance inflammation levels. Consuming wheat and spermidine sounds counterintuitive. It's interesting because spermidine itself has anti-inflammatory properties, and so this is an interesting topic. Would love to hear your thoughts on this.
That is an interesting topic. There is in our supplement, because it's from wheat germ, a little bit of gluten left. It's very minimal, but it's still there. Now, two things. On a daily dose, it's going to be low enough that people have gluten intolerance, and we have a lot of them, take it without any issues. We've never, out of caution, because we don't have the data, said to someone that has celiac disease to take it. So there is no data to it. Now, there is literature that shows spermidine can help with gluten intolerance and celiac disease, because not only because of the anti-inflammatory, but it can also be competitive inhibitor of a transglutaminase that transform gliadin into the peptide that is going to trigger the immune response. So it actually, supplementing with spermidine can help with gluten intolerance in general. So we have a ton of people that have high gluten intolerance. They take it without any issue. Out of caution, I just don't, I would, first, I'm not a doctor, so I don't recommend, but we usually don't advise people that have celiac disease to take it. That's the main of it. So,
Awesome.
but yeah.
Thank you for answering that. Let me ask a follow-up question, which I think is somewhat related. Of the products that you have, right? You have the Celvio 800 milligrams, 1300. For most patients who are just looking to boost spermidine levels for, general longevity purposes, is 800 what they should go with? Or like, how do you guide people to think about
Right.
dosing?
So the very first clinical trials we've ever done were at the lowest level we proposed, which is the 800 milligram of Celvio, corresponding to 1 milligram of daily spermidine per day. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it can make a difference. Now, the entry level we consider is usually 2 milligram of spermidine per day. This is 2 capsules. And you're going to start noticing effects, especially if you haven't taken it before. You may start noticing after a month of taking it a difference. My take on this is that I would always start with the highest dose, which is 6 milligrams. This is the level at which we do all our clinical trials now. 6 milligram, if you remember from one of my first slides, it's the lowest dose you should be intaking in your diet every day. Adding this on top helps you to start hitting the higher end of the daily needs of spermidine through a diet, which is 12 milligram. You could even go safely a little bit higher, closer to the Mediterranean diet. The reason we cap it at 6 milligram is because we're made in Europe. We have the European Novel Food Approval, a safety certificate for consumption, and they cap the daily supplementation at 6 milligram. It would be safer to go a little bit above, but it seems so far in the literature in humans that this seems to be the sweet spot where you start noticing more effect. Some people love to experiment and have reported to us that sometimes they took more, like 12 milligram, and they didn't really do much of a difference to them, so they went back to 6 milligram. So to us, this is sort of the sweet spot now. The reason we still have those other products at 3 milligram or 2 milligram is first, could be a question of cost, but it can also be a question of some people don't like the sachet. If you saw the 6 milligram was a sachet, it's to be able to pack enough of the powder. So some people prefer the pills. Historically, we came first with the 1 milligram, then 2 milligram, then the 3, and then we realized, okay, 6 might be the sweet spot. So we still have those other products. But my take on it, the highest dose, because it's safe, because it's within dietary range, is the minimum you should be taking. That's where you're going to notice the most effect. That's my take on it.
Got it. And then just last question from me, and then I want to go back to other questions from the group is, are there any situations in which, and I know you're not a doctor, like, you can't give, but just from your experience, right? Are there scenarios in which we shouldn't use spermidine? I think
Absolutely.
pregnancy being
Yeah.
one, and then are there any other kind of
Okay.
conditions or disease states that?
I have a PhD in biochemistry, but I'm not an MD, and I want to highlight this. So I'm not giving any medical
Yep,
advice,
yep,
nor do
yep,
I pretend to be
yep.
an expert in medicine in general. But I can tell you a couple of things. Spermidine is safe for consumption. and it's been shown for safety consumption up to 40 milligrams a day, which is not a dosage I recommend because it hasn't been tested in terms of health benefits, but we know it doesn't seem to be producing toxic effects. Now, all those studies, they're limited in time. Obviously, they haven't been done throughout years. I wouldn't go to an insane amount. For me, staying within the highest dietary range that exists on the planet is the most reasonable thing anyone can do, especially when they correlate with better health span and lifespan. I've taken it personally when I was pregnant because I know it's safe. I cannot recommend someone to do this. But one thing that's very interesting is that your spermidine needs are actually a bit more important when you're pregnant, just for the needs of the baby, but also after giving birth. There's a lot of spermidine that pass on through the breast milk. And that is very important for the health of the baby. There are some papers out there that show there's a correlation between gut health in those babies that they measure through fecal analysis that correlates to a higher spermidine level in the breast milk. The interesting thing is it's one of those components that's never been considered in formula. I believe that should warrant more research because it seems to be correlated with a better gut health in babies in general. I'm not recommending to use it in babies at all. I'm just saying that it's an important factor in the breast milk. One caveat of spermidine, and it is and it isn't, is that because it's essential for cellular function and it helps with cell proliferation too, in some cases, there are some cases, or in cancer, where in the tumor is going to create a sort of micro environment just around the tumor where the cells are going to produce a little bit more spermidine. And why do they do that? They basically do this to rely on more autophagy locally to evade the immune system. So what I mean is that locally, the spermidine can actually benefit the tumor. And so the only case where I would say maybe if you don't have to do it, don't do it, would be someone has an advanced stage of cancer to not take it. We work with some labs and researchers that actually look into spermidine supplementation to treat some type of cancer. So because the problem is when you have a cancer, you still ingest spermidine. Unless you're supplementing with a high dose, you're still going to benefit from a little bit more spermidine for the health of the rest of your body, right? And the local production of spermidine really favor the tumor, but it also helps your immune system attack it. So because it's a gray area, because it's not fully understood, again, I don't recommend. I would still tell a friend not to take it just because we don't know. Higher spermidine intake can help reduce the occurrence of cancer in the first place. Before having cancer, it can help prevent the development of cancer. I hope that's clear.
Thank you so much. That was great. So let's move on to some other questions. So next question is natural spermidine the only supplement that we can take to activate autophagy? Other ones like metformin, resveratrol are chemically made.
Metformin, yeah. Resveratrol, you can find it in a lot of fruits. That being said, resveratrol is in very low quantities in most of those to actually help trigger autophagy. Consuming whole foods is the basis of health anyway. So if you use a lot of plants, a lot of fruits, you should be able to help activate autophagy. Now, activate autophagy, you can also do this doing caloric restriction. That's probably the most natural way to do it. Your cells are not seeing any nutrient. They're like, oh my God, I can't divide. Let's just recycle what's inside. They increase spermidine level, which triggers autophagy. Some people, I believe, but that's my personal opinion, should not do caloric restriction, or maybe intermittent fasting might be okay, but like extended caloric restriction for some people is not advised. Like people that have low muscle mass, that have hormonal issues or hormonal imbalance, most women after a certain age, it can be a hassle to do a caloric restriction. And a lot of people just cannot sustain it. So that's where eating food that are rich in spermidine or supplemented can help activating a bit more autophagy naturally still without having to do full caloric restriction. So yeah, resveratrol does it naturally. So just if you eat a lot of fruits and veggies that have it, it can help, but not to the level of spermidine. Metformin is closer to spermidine in terms of its potency. Resveratrol has other benefits but the activation through the serotonin pathway is a little more indirect. It's not as efficient as touching on AMPK or through spermidine, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you for
Okay.
answering that. Next question. I think these are two kind of related questions. What's the difference between this spermidine product and others on the market? And what do you think about products out there that offer gluten-free or wheat-free spermidine products? This person's come across some plant-derived product sourced from Okinawa. Sounds interesting, but curious if this would achieve the same impact as the
Yeah.
real spermidine.
So if I was working in the company and I could look into all the quality analysis they do, maybe I'll have a better opinion. I can tell you that we've been one of the first on the market. Our association was still to this day with the University of Graz, and the fact that we have a very high quality control guarantee the levels for knowledge. We test other supplements, and oftentimes they don't have the amount they say they have. So that's like first one. Second, obviously, if you can find a very high quality natural source of spermidine and you can actually be sure that it is, why not? It would be similar, obviously. I'm not gonna be dishonest and tell you, no, only ours is gonna work. Obviously, it would work. Now, I just cannot guarantee what's inside. We know that ours, because of what we source, with germ, non-GMO, organic in Europe, we have very low, and we test in each batch, we have very low amounts of most herbicides, pesticides, including glyphosate, which is a big problem with germ. If it comes from rice, I'm not as familiar with the crop of rice. I can't really speak about it. I don't know if people use a lot of chemicals or not. If it's good quality, it should be similar. The only thing I would add is that stay clear, if you can, of synthetic form of spermidine. And the reason is, well, first, they don't have the amount they say they have, and we have seen this directly. It's produced chemically, and they use harsh solvents because they propose it as at a very low price. There can be a lot of traces left. Like they don't do a thorough job of making the cleanest product because the financial incentive is not there, and there's a lack of regulation that makes this problem even more important. So to each their own. I go with high quality, even if it's a bit more expensive, and I prefer the natural source.
Awesome. And maybe last question, and maybe a good one to end on is how can we order for ourselves and for our patients?
Yeah, so just go to our website called, and I'm gonna put in the chats too, but spermidinelife.us, and there is a practitioner portal. So, oh, just so you know, because there is a price point on the website itself, but practitioners get a wholesale price that is, and I'm not the best, but I think between 45 and 55% off for you to be able to make a margin too. So you get a special price when you're a health practitioner, which is not the one that you're going to see in the product line of Spermidine Life. So just head on the website, spermidinelife.us, go to the practitioner portal, create an account, and you're going to be able to access a portal to make orders. And I'm going to put also the email address of my colleague who helps everyone, all the practitioners, to create account or to help with order. Vladimir, aka Luca, that can help you. And I put his email right here. And I'm going to put mine too if you have any question or you need to be redirected. Oops, I made an error. It's not US, it's .com. Oops, sorry. So Vladimir, you don't see them? Oh, because I'm just writing to the host and panelist. Is there a general?
I
Any?
think you may, I'm not sure if you can do it, but if you can just message it to me and I can send it to everyone.
Okay.
If you click this thing, the blue thing, just select me and
Yeah, got
thing,
it.
and then I'll send it to everyone. The Zoom with the webinar thing, it doesn't.
I did send it to you, but
Got it. I can see it. Yep.
yeah, Vladimir.
Copy and paste
Yeah,
it.
I realized we can only write to you.
Yes.
Okay, and people cannot
Yeah.
see what you're.
Sorry. That's just
No,
how
it's
it is.
okay. Yes, sir. And here you have my email address too, melissa.cano@spermidinelife.com. If that's the only address you have, just write to me directly. Otherwise, just head on spermidinelife.us and you can find a practitioner portal to create an account and order.
Aw-
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. This was fantastic. a really
Thanks
great,
for having
thorough
me.
overview of spermidine and some of the underlying mechanisms and some of the exciting applications. I think, for this group, this is a molecule that's very interesting. One of my questions, I think it's a very versatile molecule, and that makes it very
Absolutely.
interesting. As we start to understand how it interacts with some of these pathways in interesting ways, definitely something to keep track of, right? 'Cause it seems like there's more and more research coming out about the interaction of spermidine with different cellular networks and in turn
Yeah,
disease states that are associated with those networks. So
absolutely.
definitely something
And
to track.
I just want to add, if you want to know more, go on Google Scholar. You will see that every week there are new papers coming out. So it's still a molecule of interest. It might not be as of interest to the financial market because it's natural, cannot be patented, So like also keep in mind that there are some tools out there that are natural and accessible and probably don't create as much buzz because there is less money incentive for people to sell it. So just do your own research, and I think you will learn a lot. One last thing also, if anyone wants to, I'm happy to share the PDF or the slide. Shoot me an email and I'll send you the PDF if anyone is interested. The more sharing, the better. I'm happy to give it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you everyone for logging on. This recording will be available on the platform shortly. Thank you so much once again for all of your time.
Thank you for having me. That was fun.
Awesome. Well, take care. Have a good weekend.
Bye bye.
Bye.